No. No. I think we can do without the crack pipe. Welcome to another episode of Stumari, in episode 4, how you negotiate your first software contract. I'm Tom, and you're going to want to stick around until the end because that's when I'm going to tell you the open secret of all contracts. I do it, you do it, everybody does it. The biggest gotcha in the contract game. This is a 10-part series for first-time app developers. I'm assuming you don't have any coding knowledge. The computers are all off. I'm just in my home office reviewing some terms and conditions for contract proposals. If you've already gone to Upwork and you have a developer or several developers competing for your particular project, maybe you're already at the proposal stage, and that's why this YouTube search came up. With that in mind, let's talk about the various aspects of your software proposal. You being the project owner are probably most concerned about the features and the specifications being clearly conveyed in the proposal of the project. Meanwhile, your developer is probably going to be more concerned about the milestone payments because those milestones are how they get paid, obviously. Mostly milestones are broken into like 4 or 5 parts. There's a down payment, and then it's usually after wireframing, and then there's some development. Development might be bifurcated into 2 parts, and then there's final deployment. Here's a quick tip, buddy. After your software is built, where's it going to live? Who's going to be maintaining and operating it? Well, hopefully the users, or in our case, the Stumari, are using it great, and it's a lot of fun. Software doesn't end. Software is an iterative, recursive process that literally cannot end. So if you're creating an app, if you're creating a dynamic website that has users, you always have to be upgrading it. Try to get away from looking at the software that you have an app idea at as being something that can be built like a car and then it's done. Even cars, you need to rotate the tires and change the oil, and things wear out and break. And it's no different for software, except software's always getting enhanced. And if you do a great job and you have a really cool, like what we like to call at Stumari, a shovel app, something that is useful, people want, other people are going to come into the marketplace. So you always have to be updating it. So when you're looking at your milestones in your project, that's fine. I want you to know that there is always another milestone. You have to pay for hosting. You have to pay Amazon or Google or whatever cloud service that you're using. You care about the features. The developers care about the milestone payments. Me, as an attorney, I care about the IP, the terms and conditions, and other contractual language. Why? Because your heart, your wishes, your dreams about your app are not legally binding. This, the contract, that's what's legally binding. So I want you to let me use my license to print money to assist in helping you build yours. Now let's talk about the terms and conditions that are very often in these types of development contracts. Are you buying the code? Are you buying the IP, or are you buying a license? Right now, you're watching this on YouTube. Who owns this content? Me? YouTube? Terms of service. Check the terms of service. We're operating under a terms of service right now. When you buy Microsoft Word, what did you buy? Did you buy the program Microsoft Word, or did you buy a non-exclusive license? Many times, especially as it gets more sophisticated, you, as the project owner, are not buying your IP. You're buying a non-exclusive license for it. And the developer retains a lot. Now, it's a relationship. Again, this isn't General Motors. You're not buying a car. It's more like Microsoft. You're buying magic. You're buying rights. And those rights are defined in your contract. Typically, when I'm seeing people that are developing their first app, they always want to own their own IP. And that's cool. that's fine, but just make sure that in the terms and conditions that is spelled out. If Stumari was helping you develop it, we would want an exclusive license from the software that we developed for you, strictly for the purposes of using it in advertising. Because we want to say to other firms that want to use Stumari's methods to build their software, oh yes, we've built software for you. We've built software for him. And they'd be in a portfolio. That's what I would recommend that you would put in your terms and conditions regarding the ownership of it. Further, what venue? What's a default? You know, if something goes wrong, what are your rights? Who can terminate the contract? Do you get a refund? Do you not get a refund? Many times you're going to be contracting with a company that is not from America. You have to make sure that in the terms and conditions you know what law applies. If you are a developer in Chicago or an entrepreneur in Chicago with this great app idea, but then you enter into a contract and it says the laws of Gujarat province will apply, and you cannot seek any rights or relief under the terms of this contract except for Gujarat. Remember, it's not what's in your heart and in your mind that governs your rights. It's what's in the contract. So, be careful. Be careful. Figure out what law applies. Figure out what an element of default is. And by default, I mean you've paid some money. They've gone into development. There's delays, perhaps, or the code comes back and you're not happy with it. How do you define default? What about user acceptance? And by that, when we're dealing with clients, we will have so many days after delivery of the code for the project owner. And by project owner, you're probably the project owner. The project owner is the person who's going to be on the top line of one of these contracts. Your company, Inc. What's default? What happens when you make a default? Do you have to provide notice? Can you just leave the contract? Who keeps the IP after that? Those are often in there. Hopefully they're in there. And if they aren't, you might want to consider the developer that you're using and see if that's really a good developer for you. Because it shows a little bit of inattention to detail, and if they're going to just kind of gloss over your contractual rights, what else are they going to gloss over? What's a default? What are your rights after a default? Can you sue? I often say, you probably don't want to sue. You probably want to arbitrate, simply because as an attorney who sues all the time, I don't see the upside in the suit. I don't. I see it as a money loser, and you might have already lost some money and you don't have the code that you want. I know these are all really scary things. You're thinking like, America, awesome, this is going to be the best app ever, and I can't believe it's not already printing money. I understand. Sorry, they have to bring it down a little bit. It's called CYA. You know what CYA stands for? Cover your ass. That's what you need to do. All right, so we've talked about the acceptance, the time for acceptance. So when you get code, how long do you have to test it and say this code does not conform to the specifications? There will also be a provision about change orders. Really carefully define the scope of work, because there's something out there called scope creep, and that happens in a lot of software projects. Another thing that I like to do is to integrate a non-disclosure agreement within it. And then of course, after it's completed and the code has been shipped to you, and that's the best thing ever when the code is actually shipped and it's working, and then you get into the App Store and so once that happens, then the non-disclosure doesn't matter so much, because it is really about going out and promoting your app. However, you still, software is magic. You really can't see what's going on under the surface, and so the non-disclosure would still apply as to the stuff that's powering it on the inside. I mean, when you're using software, you usually don't go, oh, that's totally Python backend. I can tell. Well, I mean, if you can, that's awesome, but 99.99% of people cannot. Also, assignment. Now, here's something you might not know about your developer that you're contracting with. That developer might have other developers, not even themselves, but just buddies of them that they'll seal the deal, and then they'll go out and they'll assign the rights to build the code to another provider, and then they'll wait and then they'll deliver you the code after they get it back from the other guy. Is that something you want? And if it is, fine, but look for the assignability clause in the contract, or if it's silent, then of course the general presumption on contracts is that they're freely assignable. Freely assignable. Ooh. The last thing that I would probably want to put into one of these contracts is to define how much indemnification or liability that the parties have. So how much will the coders protect the owners for the coders' willful violations of other companies' IPs? That's the indemnification. And then what happens if there's a breach? All right, if there is a breach, you can contractually cap the amount of damages. So if I'm representing the coders, I'm gonna be like, all right, look, if there's a problem, you know, you do something wrong here, let's just cap damages at $50, because $50, that's not even a filing fee in court. And again, there'd be an arbitration clause. So if you did try to sue, I'd move to dismiss the case because there's, you know, the parties agreed to not litigate. It's supposed to go into arbitration. And by the way, this guy's only due $50. Again, see why you need a lawyer to kind of look at these things before you go and shell out 10 grand in a milestone to a company that's in Russia? Well, we've done it again. We've reached the end of another episode of Stumari's 10-part series on how to build your first app. And if you're enjoying this content, I hope that you give us a thumbs up and click subscribe. Now, this is what you've been waiting for. The open secret about all contracts that people do and they don't even know. It's the ultimate gotcha. You know what that is? Nobody reads the contract. Ever. And by ever, I mean, okay, fine. 5 to 10% of people will read the contract, but it's the exception. Did you read your mortgage? Or did you just sign where the realtor told you to? Did you read your the retail installment contract for your car? Or did you just sign? What about your credit cards? Did you read those terms and conditions? Or did you just swipe? And of course, it's 2018, so you have to use those stupid chips that make noise and beepings. Oh, a quick software tip on that. A lot of those chip readers now, they don't go and. Now they kind of like play music afterwards. But when they all came out at first, that feature wasn't there. See, they weren't thinking creatively. They weren't thinking of a principle of design. It worked, and then at the end, it would and tell the user to remove their card. Now it's like Miles Davis and stuff, like jazz music will be coming out of it. Much better user experience. It's Stumari approved, I would say. And until next time, stay classy, stay creative. Go Stumari.